76 cattle. Dead within 30 hours. Not from eating a plant, from breathing the smoke when someone burned its trimmings a short distance from where they were kept. That case is real, documented, published just last year. And the plant responsible isn't some rare jungle species locked behind a warning sign. It's sold, right now, at ordinary garden centers across the country, with a price tag and a care label, and nothing else. Here's the uncomfortable truth most homeowners never stop to consider. In the United States, there is no law requiring a nursery to warn you that a plant is poisonous. If it looks good on a shelf and survives shipping, it gets sold. That doesn't mean nurseries are trying to deceive you. Most of these plants have real landscaping value, they're drought-tolerant, deer-resistant, low-maintenance, or just plain beautiful. The problem isn't malice. It's a quiet gap between what a plant looks like and what it actually is. If you've got a minute, hit subscribe before we get into this, because by the time we reach the end of this list, you'll understand exactly why that cattle case happened, and you'll meet a plant with a poison so potent it's actually been used in a real assassination. Both of those are still ahead. Picture this. You're walking through the nursery on a Saturday morning. The air smells like potting soil and fresh mulch. Rows of color stretch out in front of you, purples, whites, deep greens, blooms already opening in the morning sun. You pick a few plants because they're pretty, because they'll fill a bare corner of the yard, because the tag says, low maintenance, and that's exactly what you need. That's not a mistake. That's just being a normal gardener. But somewhere in that same nursery, sitting a few feet from the tomato starts and the herb seedlings, there are plants capable of putting a child in the emergency room, stopping a dog's heart, or in rare cases, doing much worse. Nobody tells you which ones. So today, we will. We're counting down 9 of the most common toxic plants sold in American nurseries, starting with the ones you probably heard whispers about, and ending with the one most likely already growing in your own front yard. Number 9 is one almost every American recognizes, azalea, and its close cousin, rhododendron. These are foundation planting royalty, dense, evergreen, covered in spring color, and cheap enough that builders plant them by the hundred outside new developments. Homeowners love them because they're hardy, they fill space fast, and they ask for almost nothing in return. But every part of this plant contains a compound called granulotoxin. It disrupts sodium channels in the heart and nervous system. Most people never see the consequences directly, but bees do. There are documented cases of what beekeepers call mad honey, where bees feed on rhododendron nectar and produce honey that's genuinely toxic to the people who eat it. If you're picturing a toddler wandering past a flowering azalea hedge, or a dog nosing through fallen blooms, you're picturing exactly the kind of ordinary moment where exposure happens. If you love the look but want the reassurance, native spirea gives you similar color and shape without the risk. That one's relatively mild, as this list goes. Number 8 Hide somewhere you'd never think to look, in a paper bag in your garage. Every autumn, hardware stores across the country sell daffodil bulbs by the bagful. They're foolproof, deer-resistant, and they come back reliably every spring with almost no effort. But the bulb itself is where the danger concentrates, a compound called licorine that causes severe digestive illness. Here's the part that catches people off guard: stored daffodil bulbs look remarkably similar to onions. Emergency rooms have documented real cases of people slicing into what they thought was dinner, only to realize afterward it was a flower bulb pulled from a shared storage bin. It's not a dramatic scenario. It's a mundane kitchen mistake with a genuinely dangerous outcome. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple: label your bulbs clearly, and never store them anywhere near food. If you want a similar early bloom with less ambiguity, crocus is a safer, visually distinct choice. Now here's where the list starts to escalate. Number 7 isn't a bulb, and it isn't something you'd eat by accident, it's a hedge, and it's one of the most common privacy screens in the country. Yew has been planted along American property lines for generations. It's dense, it holds a shape beautifully under pruning shears, and it stays green through every season, which is exactly why landscapers reach for it again and again. But nearly every part of a yew, the needles, the seeds, contains a compound called taxine, and it doesn't take much of it to cause a fatal heart arrhythmia. Agricultural extension records consistently list yew as one of the leading causes of fatal poisoning in livestock and grazing animals. Picture a horse or a goat nosing along a fence line where yew clippings were tossed after a trim. That's a real and recurring scenario on rural properties. If you want the same tidy, sculpted hedge without that risk sitting along your fence line, boxwood gives you nearly identical structure. You'd expect the next entry to be something exotic. It isn't. Number 6 has been carried down the aisle at weddings for over a century. Lily of the Valley is almost impossibly charming, tiny white bells, a sweet fragrance, and it thrives in shady, difficult corners of the yard where almost nothing else will grow. That's exactly why it stayed popular for so long. But the entire plant contains cardiac glycosides, compounds that interfere directly with heart rhythm, and that includes the water sitting in a vase of cut flowers. U.S. poison control centers log more than 250 cases involving this plant every year, and roughly 15% of those require actual medical treatment. Think about a small child, curious about a vase on the kitchen table, taking a sip of water that looks completely harmless. That's the real-world version of this risk. If you want that shaded ground cover without the danger, Solomon's seal or sweet woodruff will fill the same spot safely. We're halfway through, and so far, every plant on this list has hurt people quietly: slow symptoms, delayed reactions, easy to miss. Number 5 is different. This one announces itself. Angel's trumpet produces some of the most dramatic blooms you'll find at any nursery: enormous, trumpet-shaped flowers that release a heavy, intoxicating fragrance right around dusk. It's become a favorite for patios and porches specifically because of that evening drama. But the plant contains scopolamine and atropine, compounds that act directly on the nervous system, and ingestion can cause delirium, vivid hallucinations, and in serious cases, coma. Emergency rooms across the country have documented cases involving both accidental exposure and, unfortunately, intentional experimentation by teenagers who didn't understand what they were dealing with. If the tropical drama is what draws you to this plant, trumpet vine delivers a similarly show-stopping bloom shape without the same chemical risk. If that one affects the mind, the next plant goes straight for the body, and it doesn't even require you to eat it. Number 4 is monkshood, a cottage garden classic known for its tall, deep purple flower spires and its resistance to deer. Gardeners love it for exactly those two reasons. But monkshood contains aconitine, and this is one of the rare plants on this list where the danger isn't limited to ingestion. Aconitine can absorb directly through the skin. Historically, it was used to poison arrow tips. In modern times, there are documented cases of gardeners hospitalized simply from handling and dividing the plant barehanded. If you love that tall spire of color in a shaded border, delphinium offers a comparable look with meaningfully less risk, though a bit of caution is still warranted with any unfamiliar plant. Number 3 might be the most surprising entry so far, because you've probably heard of the medicine it's connected to without realizing the plant itself is the source. Foxglove is the quintessential English cottage garden flower, tall spires of bell-shaped blooms that self-seed generously and return year after year with almost no help from the gardener. Every part of this plant contains digitalis glycosides, and here's the detail that tends to stop people cold: that's the exact same compound class used in the heart medication digoxin. In a controlled, measured dose, it treats heart conditions. In raw plant form, uncontrolled, it can stop a heart instead of helping one. That single fact tells you everything about how a plant this beautiful earned a spot this high on the list. If you want the same tall, spiked silhouette in your border, penstemon gives you that shape safely. We're down to the final 2. And this is where the list stops being about mistakes made in the garden, and starts being about a poison potent enough to make headlines. Number 2 is castor bean, a bold, fast-growing plant that landscapers use for instant tropical drama: huge leaves, dramatic height, and strikingly modeled seed pods that genuinely look like something out of a rainforest. Those seeds are where the real danger lives. They contain ricin, a toxin that works by shutting down a cell's ability to produce protein, effectively causing organ failure from the inside. This isn't theoretical. In 1978, ricin extracted from castor bean seeds was used in one of history's most well-documented assassinations, delivered through a modified umbrella. That's not folklore, that's a matter of historical record. Picture a child in the yard, drawn to those unusual, speckled seed pods the same way they'd be drawn to any unfamiliar toy. If the bold tropical look is what you're after, rice paper plant delivers similarly dramatic foliage without carrying that risk in its seeds. And that brings us back to where we started. Number 1 is the plant from our opening story, the one responsible for those 76 cattle deaths, and quite possibly, the one already growing in your own front yard. Oleander is everywhere across the warmer parts of the country, the south, the southwest, anywhere heat and drought would kill off less resilient plants. It blooms all summer, tolerates salt and neglect, and asks for almost nothing. That's exactly why it's been planted along highways, parking lots, and front yards for decades. But every part of oleander contains cardiac glycosides that disrupt the heart's rhythm, and unlike almost everything else on this list, those toxins survive drying and even burning. That's the case we opened with: trimmings burned near livestock, and the smoke alone was enough to kill the majority of the herd within a day and a half. Picture a family doing yard cleanup on a fall weekend, tossing branches into a burn pile without a second thought. That ordinary chore is exactly how exposure happens. If you love that constant summer color, dwarf crepe myrtle gives you a similarly tough, drought-tolerant bloomer for the same climates, without that hidden danger in the smoke. So here's the honest takeaway: after all 9 of these, none of these plants are inherently bad, and nurseries aren't hiding them out of malice. Many of them have been grown safely in American gardens for generations by people who simply understood what they were working with. The real risk was never the plant sitting on the shelf, it's buying it without knowing anything about it. A few practical habits will protect you more than any single fact on this list. Before you buy an unfamiliar plant, look up its scientific name rather than just its common name, since common names vary and sometimes overlap between a harmless plant and a dangerous one. Wear gloves with anything you don't fully recognize, especially before pruning or dividing it. Keep the more hazardous plants on this list away from areas where children play or pets roam freely. And if you ever suspect a poisoning has actually happened, in a person, a pet, or livestock, contact poison control, a physician, or a veterinarian immediately. Don't wait, and don't rely on internet forums to talk you through it. So, take an honest look at your own yard right now. Do you already have one of these 9 sitting somewhere on your property, and did you know it before today? A beautiful landscape and a safe one aren't opposites, they're both achievable, once you know what you're actually growing. And if you want to take this further, our next video walks through safe, pet-friendly, and kid-friendly landscaping swaps for every single plant on this list, so you can keep the color without keeping the risk. Subscribe so you don't miss it.